high in the frozen, unforgiving peaks of the Peruvian Andes. A massive glacier watches over a place that simply should not exist. To reach it, you must navigate hours of treacherous, unpaved mountain roads that snake precariously along terrifying, sheer cliffs. As you climb higher into the atmosphere, the air becomes painfully thin, and the lush green valleys are replaced by barren, gray rock. At 5,100 meters above sea level, emerging from the freezing mist, you find a chaotic, sprawling metropolis of corrugated metal. This altitude is so extreme that human biology begins to fail. There is exactly half the oxygen here compared to sea level. There is no running water, no functioning sewage system, no law enforcement, and the temperature spends most of the year below freezing. It is a place choked by toxic smoke, extreme poverty, and the constant, crushing weight of severe altitude sickness. Yet, despite these apocalyptic conditions, over 50,000 desperate people have flocked to this frozen wasteland for one single reason: gold. Welcome to La Rinconada, the highest permanent human settlement on Earth, and arguably the closest thing to a living hell. We are here to discover how far humanity is willing to push its own limits of suffering in the relentless pursuit of wealth. Before you even understand the culture of La Rinconada, you must first confront the absolute biological impossibility of simply standing here at over 16,000 feet. Simply taking a few steps feels like running a marathon as your lungs desperately scrape for invisible oxygen. New arrivals are frequently struck down by severe acute mountain sickness, suffering blinding headaches, violent nausea, and complete physical collapse. The cold is not just a temperature, it is an aggressive physical entity that seeps through layers of wool and settles deep into your bones. At this altitude, the environment is located far above the tree line. Absolutely nothing grows here, meaning every calorie must be imported. Even sleep offers no relief because as your breathing slows down at night, your brain frequently wakes you up in a sudden panic, starved of air. The atmosphere provides almost no protection from the sun's harsh ultraviolet rays, yet the town is perpetually locked in a gloomy, freezing shadow. Prolonged exposure to this altitude physically thickens the blood, turning a healthy heart into an overworked engine, desperately trying to pump sludge. This is the death zone for normal human habitation, an altitude where the human body is designed to slowly shut down and die. Yet, tens of thousands of people wake up here every single day and perform incredibly grueling physical labor. Looking out over La Rinconada, the sheer scale of the architectural chaos is visually overwhelming and deeply disturbing. There was no master plan, no city council, and no engineering involved in the creation of this massive, sprawling shanty town. Houses are stacked haphazardly on top of one another, separated only by narrow, steep alleyways that constantly flow with freezing, contaminated mud. Every structure is built entirely from cheap, uninsulated corrugated tin, providing absolutely zero defense against the sub-zero night temperatures. A terrifying web of illegally tapped electrical wires hangs dangerously low over the streets, occasionally sparking in the freezing rain. Inside these metal boxes, families huddle together in a single room, sharing body heat because electric heaters are an unaffordable luxury. Because there is no plumbing, open gutters run directly through the center of town, carrying a toxic slurry of human waste and industrial chemicals. Garbage collection does not exist here. Trash is simply thrown out the front door, accumulating in massive, frozen piles that line every street. When the freezing fog rolls through the alleys, the town looks less like a human settlement and more like a post-apocalyptic refugee camp. It is a temporary mining camp that accidentally swelled into a massive metropolis, completely unequipped to handle its own desperate population. To understand the existence of this frozen slum, you must understand the powerful, intoxicating, and historically lethal allure of gold. The massive mountain towering above the town, known as La Bella Durmiente, or Sleeping Beauty, is riddled with thousands of unregulated mine shafts for centuries. The Andes have hidden immense wealth, but the gold of La Rinconada is buried in some of the hardest, most inaccessible rock on Earth. Most of the people who arrive here are escaping extreme poverty in the lower valleys, driven by a desperate, blinding hope. They take the terrifying bus ride up the mountain, believing that they will only stay for a few months, just long enough to strike it rich. But the mountain is a trap. The vast majority find just enough gold to survive the week, but never enough to actually buy their ticket home. They become completely trapped in a brutal cycle of poverty, their initial optimisms slowly freezing into a grim daily struggle for sheer survival. The gold does not bring prosperity to this town. It brings a frantic, lawless desperation that erodes the basic foundations of human decency. It is a modern-day gold rush stripped of all romance, revealing only the ugly, naked greed that forces humans to endure the unendurable. Sleeping Beauty does not share her treasures willingly. She demands a heavy sacrifice of blood, sweat, and frozen tears. The most shocking aspect of La Rinconada is not the altitude or the cold, but the bizarre medieval economic system that governs the mines. The vast majority of the miners here do not receive a traditional salary, nor are they paid by the hour or by the kilogram. Instead, they work under a brutal, unregulated system known as the cacoreo, a labor model that borders on modern indentured servitude. Under this system, a miner works for the mine boss for 30 consecutive days without receiving a single cent in compensation. They endure the freezing temperatures, the toxic dust, and the lethal danger of cave-ins for a month, entirely for free. Then, on the 31st day, they are allowed to enter the mine and take home as much rock as they can, physically carry on their backs whatever gold is hidden inside that single, heavy sack of rock is their entire paycheck for a month of grueling, life-threatening labor. It is an incredible, terrifying gamble. The sack might contain a fortune, or, as is often the case, it might contain absolutely nothing but worthless dirt. When a miner finds nothing, he must simply wipe his face, turn around, and begin another 30 days of unpaid labor in the dark. This lottery system preys on extreme desperation, ensuring that the mine bosses stay wealthy while the workers remain permanently tied to the mountain. Stepping inside the mines of La Rinconada is like leaving the surface of the earth and entering a dark, freezing, claustrophobic nightmare. There is no modern safety equipment, no reinforced steel beams, and absolutely no ventilation to clear the thick, toxic dust from the air. The tunnels are completely unregulated, a chaotic, unmapped labyrinth carved randomly into the mountain by thousands of desperate men over decades. Freezing glacial water constantly drips from the ceilings, turning the floors into a slippery, treacherous hazard of jagged rock and thick mud. The air inside is thick with the smell of sulfur, human sweat, and the sharp, chemical sting of highly explosive dynamite fumes. Explosives are used carelessly by untrained men, triggering violent blasts that shake the unstable rock and frequently cause lethal cave-ins because the tunnels are illegally dug and completely unsupported. The terrifying sound of shifting rock is a constant companion in the dark. Despite the intense physical labor, The temperature deep inside the glacier remains bitterly cold, constantly threatening the miners with hypothermia. They work in total darkness, guided only by the dim, flickering beam of a cheap headlamp strapped to a cracked plastic helmet. Every time a miner steps into the mountain, they are acutely aware that they might never walk back out. If surviving the treacherous conditions inside the mine is the first challenge, extracting the gold from the rock is where the real horror begins. Once a miner carries his heavy sack of rock back to his freezing tin shack, he must manually crush the stone into a fine, gray powder. To separate the invisible gold from the dirt, they use an ancient, highly toxic, and globally banned extraction method: liquid mercury. They mix the raw mercury directly into the crushed rock with their bare hands, allowing the liquid metal to bind with the tiny particles of gold. This creates a small, solid amalgam ball, which the miner then takes to a tiny, unventilated shop right in the middle of town. Using a simple blowtorch, they burn the amalgam over an open flame, vaporizing the mercury into the air and leaving behind a tiny nugget of pure gold. The toxic, invisible mercury vapor pours out of the shop chimneys, rolling down the crowded streets and settling over the entire settlement. Every man, woman, and child in Rinconada breathes in this highly neurotoxic gas 24 hours a day, every single day of their lives. It is a slow, silent poisoning that silently destroys their nervous systems, causing chronic tremors, severe memory loss, and eventual organ failure. They are literally poisoning their own brains and destroying their own town, all for a piece of metal the size of a fingernail. The environmental devastation caused by this chaotic, unregulated gold rush extends far beyond the toxic smoke, filling the freezing alleyways. Hundreds of tons of raw liquid mercury are spilled directly into the ice and mud every single year, completely unchecked by any government authority. This heavy metal seeps deep into the melting glacier, mixing with human sewage and highly acidic mining runoff to create a lethal cocktail. This toxic sludge flows off the mountain, heavily contaminating the rivers and streams that feed the agricultural valleys located far below. Because the town has absolutely no waste management, a massive frozen glacier of plastic bottles and rotting garbage constantly slowly slides down the mountain. The delicate, high-altitude Andean ecosystem, which survived for millions of years in pristine isolation, has been completely and irreversibly obliterated. The soil is so heavily contaminated that it will likely remain completely toxic and entirely unable to support life for centuries to come. From above, La Rinconada looks like a massive, rotting gray wound violently slashed into the pure white snow of the sacred mountains. It is a terrifying testament to how quickly human greed can completely annihilate an environment when all rules and regulations are stripped away. The miners are not just destroying their own health, they are poisoning the very earth that sits beneath their freezing feet. In a town of over 50,000 transient, desperate people perched at the edge of the world, formal law enforcement is essentially a myth. There is a tiny, underfunded police presence, but the officers are vastly outnumbered, terrified, and heavily bribed to look the other way. La Rinconada operates entirely on a brutal, primal code of frontier justice, where violence is the primary tool for resolving disputes. If a miner strikes a rich vein of gold, he must guard his secret with extreme paranoia. Because theft is common and often fatal, robberies in the dark, unmapped mine shafts are frequent. Men simply disappear into the mountain, their bodies hidden forever in collapsed tunnels. When a crime is committed, the community rarely calls the police. Instead, mob justice takes over, dealing out swift and brutal punishments in the street. Bars and brothels dominate the narrow alleyways, heavily fortified with thick iron bars and guarded by heavily armed, suspicious men. Alcoholism is rampant, used as a desperate, temporary escape from the freezing cold, the crushing physical pain, and the psychological trauma of the mines. After the sun sets and the freezing fog rolls in, the streets become incredibly dangerous, a place where life is considered shockingly cheap. It is a society completely stripped of its civilized veneer, operating purely on survival of the fittest in an atmosphere starved of oxygen. Despite the overwhelming presence of modern greed and extreme violence, the ancient mystical beliefs of the Andes still hold massive power here. The miners firmly believe that the mountain is a living, breathing, and highly temperamental deity known as El Tío, or the Uncle. El Tío is the absolute ruler of the underworld, a terrifying figure who controls the veins of gold and the safety of the dark tunnels. Before beginning a shift, miners always stop at small, crude shrines located deep in the rock to offer him pure alcohol, cigarettes, and coca leaves. They believe that if El Tío is not properly respected and appeased, he will angrily swallow them whole, causing a sudden lethal cave-in. In times of extreme drought or bad luck, highly secretive and deeply unsettling ancient rituals are performed to beg the mountain for mercy. This creates a bizarre psychological duality. They are brutally tearing the mountain apart for profit, while simultaneously worshiping it with terrifying reverence. Catholicism heavily blends with these ancient pagan fears. Miners wear crosses around their necks while praying to the devil of the deep rock. In a place where logic, safety, and modern science have completely failed them, extreme superstition is the only thing offering them a sense of control. They know they are stealing from the mountain, and they live in constant, paranoid fear of the day the mountain finally decides to take its revenge. While the men disappear into the dark, dangerous tunnels, the surface of the mountain is completely dominated by an army of resilient women, known as the palaqueras. These tough, indigenous women are strictly forbidden from entering the actual mine shafts due to ancient, deeply misogynistic superstitions. According to local myth, the mountain god is incredibly jealous, and if a woman enters the tunnel, the gold will immediately disappear into the rock. So, they wait outside in the freezing wind, manually picking through the massive piles of waste rock that the male miners have discarded. They sit for 12 hours a day in the sub-zero mud, smashing rocks with heavy hammers, desperately hoping to find a microscopic flake of overlooked gold. It is backbreaking, agonizingly tedious labor that completely destroys their hands and ruins their posture over decades of freezing exposure. Despite the brutal conditions, these women form a fiercely tight-knit sisterhood, protecting each other from the constant violence and chaos of the town. Many are single mothers, working with their babies strapped tightly to their backs in thick wool blankets, inhaling the toxic dust as they sleep. Finding a single gram of gold can take a week of solid crushing, meaning their survival constantly hangs by a terrifyingly thin thread. The palaqueras are the ultimate symbol of La Rinconada, marginalized, deeply superstitious, but possessing an absolutely unbreakable will to survive. Growing up in La Rinconada is a deeply traumatic experience, stripping away the innocence of childhood almost immediately upon arrival. There are absolutely no playgrounds, no green spaces, and no safe areas. The entire town is a hazardous, highly toxic industrial zone. Children breathe the exact same mercury-laced air as the miners, meaning neurological damage and developmental delays are tragically common. From a very young age, kids are put to work hauling heavy buckets of water up the steep, icy hills to their freezing tin shacks. The local schools are severely underfunded, lacking basic heating, clean water, and qualified teachers willing to endure the brutal altitude. Many children simply drop out of school entirely to join their mothers on the mountain, crushing rocks in the freezing wind. By the time they reach adolescence, the toxic, desperate culture of the town has deeply normalized extreme violence and rampant alcoholism. They play games using discarded mining equipment and toxic trash, their imaginations severely limited by the grim, gray reality surrounding them. They do not dream of becoming astronauts or doctors. They dream of finding a massive nugget of gold and finally escaping the freezing mud. It is a childhood entirely devoid of warmth or safety, a cruel introduction to the absolute harshest realities of human existence. In a town entirely surrounded by a massive, frozen glacier, accessing clean drinking water is an ironic and incredibly expensive daily nightmare. The local streams and glacial meltwater are so heavily contaminated with human feces, cyanide, and mercury that drinking them is essentially suicidal. There is no plumbing infrastructure, meaning every single drop of clean water must be trucked up the treacherous mountain road from valleys far below. Because transport is so difficult, clean water is sold at exorbitant prices, making it a precious luxury that many desperate miners simply cannot afford. Families must severely ration their water, using a single small basin to wash their faces, clean their dishes, and finally boil for tea. During the brutal winter nights, any water stored inside the uninsulated tin shacks freezes completely solid, requiring it to be thawed over a small fire. Basic hygiene is nearly impossible to maintain, leading to rampant, easily preventable skin infections and devastating gastrointestinal diseases, spreading rapidly through the dense population. The few public bathhouses that exist are filthy, freezing, and often lack running water, making a hot shower a completely mythical concept. When money runs completely out, desperate families are forced to melt the polluted snow, knowingly poisoning themselves just to survive another day. In La Rinconada, water is not a basic human right. It is a highly volatile commodity controlled entirely by the ruthless laws of supply and demand. The lack of oxygen at 5,000 meters does not just make you out of breath. It systematically and aggressively attacks your entire biology. Chronic mountain sickness, known locally as sewage, is a constant, suffocating companion that never truly leaves, even for the seasoned locals. To compensate for the thin air, the human body desperately overproduces red blood cells, turning the blood incredibly thick and sludgy. This massive increase in blood viscosity forces the heart to work twice as hard, leading to dangerously high blood pressure and massive, sudden heart attacks. Miners suffer from blinding, relentless migraines, severe dizziness, and a profound, bone-deep exhaustion that sleep simply cannot cure. The extreme pressure on the lungs frequently causes pulmonary edema, a terrifying condition where the lungs slowly fill with fluid, essentially drowning the person on dry land. The tiny local medical clinic is completely overwhelmed, lacking the advanced equipment and supplemental oxygen required to treat these severe biological failures. Cognitive function severely declines. People become confused, irritable, and suffer massive memory loss because their brains are constantly starving for air. The physical toll is shockingly visible. A man of 40 often looks 60, his body rapidly aged by the relentless, invisible stress of the atmosphere. Living here is a slow, agonizing war of attrition between the human body and an environment that is actively trying to shut it down. When human beings are subjected to extreme physical and psychological trauma, their methods of seeking entertainment become equally extreme and desperate. As night falls and the freezing fog rolls in, the narrow, muddy streets fill with miners seeking immediate, aggressive oblivion. The town is packed with hundreds of illegal bars and heavily guarded brothels, operating completely openly without any fear of police intervention. Miners who just spent 30 days working for free will often blow their entire tiny gold strike in a single night of frantic, desperate binge drinking. Cheap, highly addictive drugs are heavily consumed to numb the physical pain of the grueling labor and the crushing psychological despair of the altitude. These dimly lit spaces are powder kegs of tension. Violent brawls frequently erupt over stolen gold, unpaid debts, or perceived insults, often ending in severe bloodshed. The music blares aggressively into the freezing night, creating a bizarre, surreal contrast against the absolute silence of the surrounding massive glaciers. Human trafficking is a massive, highly ignored issue, with desperate women lured up the mountain with false promises of legitimate work. For many miners, these chaotic nights are not a celebration of life, but a desperate, temporary suicide of the conscious mind. When the sun finally rises, the illusion shatters, leaving them broke, hungover, and forced to face the dark tunnels once again. Absolutely nothing in La Rinconada exists on an official government record. It is a massive, sprawling monument to the global informal economy. There are no official property deeds, no building permits, no health inspections, and no corporate safety regulations holding anyone accountable. The gold buyers operate out of tiny, heavily fortified shacks, paying cash under the table and entirely bypassing the national tax system. This massive flow of untraceable wealth attracts powerful, organized criminal syndicates who launder the illegal gold directly into the global market. You can buy absolutely anything on the street: fresh vegetables, highly explosive dynamite, liquid mercury, and cheap alcohol, all completely unregulated. If the electricity fails, you do not call the utility company. You simply climb a pole in the freezing rain and illegally splice a new wire yourself. Transport is handled by a ruthless mafia of private drivers, navigating the lethal mountain roads with completely overloaded, poorly maintained vans. The only form of governance comes from highly informal, deeply corrupt local mining syndicates who enforce their own brutal, self-serving rules. This total lack of state presence creates a feeling of absolute, terrifying freedom where you are completely responsible for your own survival. It is the purest, most ruthless form of capitalism on Earth, stripped entirely of the social safety nets that define a civilized society. Escaping La Rinconada is mathematically nearly impossible because the entire informal economy is designed to trap you in a perpetual cycle of debt, because every single calorie and drop of water must be transported up the mountain. The cost of basic living is shockingly astronomical. A miner working under the unpaid 30-day Cacorio system must still eat, forcing him to take out massive loans from local, ruthless shopkeepers. These debts carry aggressively high, predatory interest rates, meaning the miner is deeply in the red before he even enters the tunnel. If his single sack of rock at the end of the month yields absolutely no gold, his debt instantly doubles, creating a terrifying financial hole. To pay off the debt, he is forced to work another unpaid month, hoping against hope that the next sack will finally clear his name. This system essentially turns independent men into indentured servants, completely beholden to the local economy just to survive the freezing nights. Even the palaqueras, crushing rocks in the freezing wind, frequently must borrow money just to buy the toxic mercury needed to extract the gold. The mountain does not just steal their physical health. It slowly, methodically drains every last ounce of their financial independence. They arrived chasing the ultimate financial freedom, only to find themselves locked inside a freezing, high-altitude debtor's prison. When the sun disappears behind the massive glaciers, La Rinconada transforms from a desperate mining camp into an agonizing test of physical endurance. The temperature plummets violently, regularly hitting -20 degrees Celsius, turning the muddy streets into jagged, rock-hard ice because the homes are built entirely of uninsulated corrugated tin. The interior temperature is completely identical to the freezing air outside. Families huddle together under piles of thick, heavy alpaca blankets, using the combined body heat of 5 or 6 people just to avoid freezing to death in their sleep. Some desperate miners attempt to light small coal fires inside their unventilated shacks, tragically suffocating themselves with invisible carbon monoxide. The wind howls aggressively off the glacier, violently rattling the thin metal roofs and forcing its way through every tiny crack in the walls. Sleep is shallow and constantly interrupted by the extreme cold, the severe lack of oxygen, and the loud, chaotic violence of the drunken streets outside. When morning finally breaks, the inside of the metal walls is completely coated in a thick, white layer of frozen condensation from their own breath. Waking up requires immense willpower, forcing your stiff, freezing body to crawl out of the blankets and face the brutal reality of the mountain once again. The nights here are not meant for rest. They are a grueling, terrifying battle against the cold that you must win every single day. Despite the horrifying reality, the terrifying bus ride up the mountain continues to deliver a fresh, constant supply of desperate new souls. They step off the bus wearing thin jackets entirely unsuited for the freezing altitude, their eyes wide with shock as they survey the chaotic, muddy slum. Within minutes, the brutal lack of oxygen hits them like a physical blow, forcing them to sit in the freezing mud, gasping desperately for air. They arrived heavily influenced by wild, exaggerated rumors of massive gold nuggets and instant wealth whispered in the lower, impoverished valleys. The seasoned veterans watch these new arrivals with a mix of cynical amusement and deep, unspoken pity, knowing exactly what awaits them in the dark. The new men quickly buy cheap, inadequate gear on heavy credit, instantly locking themselves into the town's inescapable cycle of predatory debt. They possess a blinding, reckless optimism, firmly believing that they will be the lucky exception to the brutal rules of the mountain. They take their very first steps into the freezing, toxic tunnels, entirely unprepared for the sheer physical agony of unpaid, high-altitude labor. It usually takes less than a week for the romantic illusion of the gold rush to completely shatter against the hard, unyielding reality of the rock. The mountain does not care about their hopes or their dreams. It simply waits, ready to slowly break their bodies and their spirits. After a few years in La Rinconada, the blinding gold fever eventually burns out, replaced by a heavy, profound psychological numbness. The miner realizes that the massive fortune he dreamed of is mathematically impossible, and that he is simply destroying his body for basic survival. He looks at his hands, scarred and permanently stained gray from toxic dust, and realizes he has traded his youth for a few microscopic flakes of metal. His lungs constantly ache from the silica dust. His nervous system twitches from the mercury, and his heart struggles violently against the thin air. The terrifying, unmapped tunnels no longer hold the promise of adventure. They are simply a dark, freezing prison that he must voluntarily enter every day. He realizes that even if he does strike a rich vein, the money will likely be stolen, spent on alcohol, or immediately consumed by his massive debts. He begins to desperately dream of returning to the lush, green, oxygen-rich valleys below, a place that now feels like a mythical paradise. But the deep shame of returning home completely broke, combined with the crushing financial debts holding him hostage, keeps him permanently anchored to the ice. The ultimate tragedy of La Rinconada is not the poverty or the cold. It is the agonizingly slow death of human hope. He accepts his fate, picks up his heavy hammer, and slowly walks back into the freezing dark, trapped forever in the city above the clouds. In a town entirely devoid of official records, the most chilling aspect of La Rinconada is how easily human beings can simply disappear without a trace. When a massive cave-in occurs deep inside the illegal, unmapped tunnels, rescue operations are incredibly rare and highly disorganized. If tons of solid rock crush a group of miners, the syndicate bosses often decide that digging out the bodies is simply too dangerous and expensive. The collapsed shaft is quietly abandoned, heavily sealed off, and the entombed men are left exactly where they died in the freezing dark. Families down in the lower valleys wait anxiously for months, slowly realizing that their son or husband has simply vanished into the mountain. Because there are no official employment rosters for the Cacoreo system, there is no official paper trail proving the man was ever even there. The tiny, corrupt local police force has absolutely zero resources or desire to investigate disappearances inside the labyrinth of the glaciers. Murders over stolen gold are frequently covered up by simply dropping the victim into one of the hundreds of abandoned, bottomless mine shafts. The glacier acts as a massive, silent graveyard, swallowing the desperate and the unlucky, perfectly preserving their bodies in the eternal ice. The mountain does not just take their labor, it completely erases their existence from the face of the earth. When consumers walk into a brightly lit, air-conditioned jewelry store in New York or London, they see gold as a symbol of pure romance and luxury. They have absolutely no concept of the horrifying, toxic journey that specific piece of metal took to reach their pristine velvet box. The true cost of that gold is not measured in dollars. It is measured in the severely shortened lifespans of the desperate men who dragged it out of the ice. It is measured in the irreversible neurological damage inflicted upon entire generations of children breathing vaporized mercury in the freezing streets. It is measured in the complete ecological annihilation of a pristine, high-altitude Andean ecosystem that will never recover. It is paid for by the Palaqueros, sitting 12 hours a day in sub-zero mud, completely destroying their hands for microscopic flakes of wealth, because the gold from La Rinconada is illegally mined and completely unregulated. It is easily laundered into the global supply chain. Once it is melted down and mixed with legitimate gold in massive international refineries, its dark, violent history is completely erased. The modern global consumer remains blissfully, willfully ignorant of the medieval suffering required to extract their shiny status symbols. If jewelry carried a label showing where it was mined, the glittering allure of gold would instantly turn deeply, nauseatingly dark. The most tragic paradox of La Rinconada is that despite pulling millions of dollars of gold from the mountain, The town itself is overwhelmingly impoverished. The wealth generated here does not build schools, it does not pave roads, and it absolutely does not create a functioning sanitation system. Instead, the money immediately flows completely out of the town, siphoned off by corrupt syndicate bosses, illegal buyers, and organized crime. For the average miner, any sudden strike of luck is immediately swallowed by their massive debts to the predatory local shopkeepers. The true winners of the La Rinconada gold rush do not live in freezing tin shacks. They live in massive mansions in the distant capital of Lima. The town is essentially a massive, freezing ATM for the global elite, exploiting extreme human desperation for maximum profit. Even the few independent miners who manage to save a significant sum often find themselves trapped, unable to safely transport the cash out of the lawless town. The constant, paranoid fear of being violently robbed forces people to hide their wealth, living in squalor to avoid attracting dangerous attention. The illusion of imminent wealth is the powerful drug that keeps them digging, but the reality is a brutal system designed to keep them poor. The mountain produces vast riches, but it aggressively refuses to share them with the desperate souls actually doing the bleeding. In a place where there is already exactly half the oxygen needed for normal human survival, the air quality is catastrophically compromised because there is no waste management. The primary method of disposing of massive piles of plastic and chemical garbage is simply setting them on fire. This thick, black smoke mixes heavily with the invisible, highly neurotoxic mercury vapor constantly pouring from the unregulated gold shops. The freezing temperatures and unique geography trap this incredibly toxic smog directly over the town, creating a permanent, suffocating canopy of pollution. Residents are constantly coughing, their lungs battling the dual assault of severe high-altitude hypoxia and aggressive chemical irritation. Inside the uninsulated shacks, families burn anything they can find, coal, plastic, or toxic scrap wood, just to avoid freezing to death in their sleep. The indoor air pollution is horrifyingly dense, leading to severe chronic respiratory diseases that silently kill the very young and the very old. There is absolutely no escape from the pollution. Whether you are deep inside the dusty mine or walking the freezing streets, you are slowly suffocating. The environment does not just passively challenge human survival. The toxic atmosphere actively and aggressively attacks the human body. Every single breath taken in La Rinconada is a slow, methodical compromise of long-term health for short-term survival. When human beings are pushed to the absolute breaking point of physical and psychological endurance, they invariably turn to extreme faith. In La Rinconada, religion is not a casual weekend tradition. It is a desperate, frantic daily plea for basic survival in a completely lawless hellscape. Catholicism is fiercely practiced, with small, beautifully maintained shrines to the Virgin Mary standing in stark contrast to the massive piles of garbage. Miners desperately seek blessings before entering the dark, unstable tunnels, fully aware that they are entirely unprotected by modern safety standards. In the freezing, terrifying nights, the flickering light of a prayer candle offers the only psychological warmth available in the uninsulated tin shacks. But this faith is deeply intertwined with a terrifying, ancient Andean paganism, creating a highly unique, dualistic spiritual survival mechanism. They pray to God to save their souls, but they actively bribe the terrifying mountain god, El Tío, to physically protect their bodies in the dark. They believe the mountain demands sacrifices, meaning every tragic, lethal cave-in is viewed not as a predictable engineering failure, but as a divine tax. This complex, desperate faith provides a crucial psychological armor, allowing them to endure conditions that would instantly break a rational, secular mind. They must believe in a higher power because completely accepting the grim, mechanical reality of their brutal situation would drive them entirely insane. Despite looking like completely chaotic anarchy from the outside, La Rinconada actually operates on a highly rigid, unwritten social hierarchy. At the absolute top of the food chain are the shadowy syndicate bosses and unregulated gold buyers, controlling the wealth and heavily bribing the police. Below them are the private security guards and mafia enforcers, holding massive power simply because they control the only functional weapons in town. In the vast, struggling middle class are the Cacareo miners, enduring the brutal unpaid 30-day cycles, constantly balancing on the edge of massive debt. At the absolute bottom of this brutal hierarchy are the palaqueras, the indigenous women forced to scavenge the freezing waste rock for microscopic scraps. Even lower than the women are the forgotten children, scavenging the massive, toxic garbage dumps for anything that can be burned for warmth. This rigid structure is enforced not by laws, but by raw physical power, extreme desperation, and the ruthless, informal economics of the gold trade. Upward mobility is the great, powerful myth that keeps the town functioning, but the reality is that the hierarchy is completely locked in place by debt. The people at the bottom are deliberately kept in a state of constant, exhausting panic, ensuring a steady supply of cheap, desperate labor for the mines. It is a micro-society perfectly designed to exploit the weakest members, mimicking the cruelest aspects of pure, unregulated capitalism. La Rinconada is not a traditional hometown where families put down deep, multi-generational roots. It is a highly transient, completely temporary camp. Almost nobody actually wants to be here. Every single person arrived with a firm, optimistic plan to stay for only a few months and then leave forever. This creates a profound lack of community investment. Nobody cares about building schools, paving roads, or fixing the toxic sewage system. Why would you spend your hard-earned gold improving a freezing, toxic slum when your entire goal is to escape it as quickly as possible? The population is constantly shifting, a chaotic river of desperate men arriving from the lower valleys while broken, exhausted men quietly return home. Because the town is entirely built on the assumption of leaving, the architecture remains aggressively temporary, flimsy, and completely unsuited for long-term survival. This extreme transience breeds a deep, underlying loneliness and a severe lack of trust among neighbors, heavily contributing to the lawless atmosphere. Yet, the town continues to grow rapidly, constantly fed by the crushing, systemic poverty of the surrounding regions and the irresistible allure of illegal gold. It is a permanent city composed entirely of temporary people, a massive, freezing monument to the enduring power of human desperation. La Rinconada refuses to die, constantly regenerating its exhausted population by preying on the endless hope of the desperately poor. Surviving La Rinconada requires more than just immense physical endurance. It requires a psychological resilience that borders on complete madness. The sensory deprivation of working 12 hours in total darkness, constantly terrified of a sudden, lethal cave-in, slowly erodes the human mind, returning to the surface only to breathe highly neurotoxic mercury vapor and freezing, polluted smog provides absolutely no psychological relief. The extreme, aggressive cold preventing deep, restorative sleep means the entire population is constantly operating on the verge of massive nervous exhaustion. The sheer volume of ambient violence, severe alcoholism, and extreme poverty creates an atmosphere of constant, underlying paranoia and heavy dread. The extreme altitude hypoxia literally starves the brain of oxygen, causing severe mood swings, deep irrational anger, and profound clinical depression. Mental health resources are entirely non-existent. If a miner suffers a severe psychological breakdown, he is simply left to wander the freezing streets. They use cheap, highly destructive drugs and alcohol as an emergency psychological valve, desperately trying to numb a reality that is completely unendurable. The people who survive here long-term have successfully normalized the absolute worst extremes of human suffering, shutting down their emotional responses entirely. To stay sane in the highest, most toxic city on Earth, you must first accept a reality that any normal person would consider completely insane. Looking at the absolute, unchecked horror of La Rinconada, an outsider naturally asks a very simple question: where is the national government? The truth is that the town is located so incredibly high and is so geographically isolated that it is essentially invisible to the wealthy politicians in the capital. The government occasionally attempts half-hearted raids to shut down the illegal mining and seize the highly toxic mercury. But these efforts are largely theatrical. The formal authorities are vastly outmatched, heavily underfunded, and deeply susceptible to massive bribes from the wealthy, powerful local mining syndicates. Furthermore, trying to forcibly evict 50,000 heavily armed, desperate miners from a freezing mountain would trigger an absolute bloodbath. It is politically much easier to simply look the other way, pretending that the highest city on Earth is just a temporary, localized problem. This willful blindness allows the complete ecological destruction and massive human rights abuses to continue entirely unchecked, year after brutal year. The total absence of the state means there is no labor board to protect the children, no environmental agency to stop the mercury, and no health department to regulate the water. La Rinconada exists in a massive, terrifying legal blind spot, a place where the basic rules of modern civilization have been completely suspended. It is a stark, highly uncomfortable reminder of exactly what happens when desperate people are entirely abandoned by the society that was supposed to protect them. Perhaps the most devastating tragedy of La Rinconada is not the ecological destruction, but the total, systematic theft of human potential. The teenagers living here do not worry about college exams or modern social media trends. They worry about surviving a lethal cave-in or freezing at night. Incredibly bright, capable children are completely trapped by the inescapable gravity of the Cacoreo debt system. Before they even reach adulthood, their physical bodies are rapidly broken down by the grueling labor, their lungs damaged by the silica dust, and their brains poisoned by the vaporized mercury. They are forced to mature at a terrifyingly rapid pace, immediately thrust into a brutal, violent adult world that offers absolutely zero mercy. The extreme isolation and severe lack of basic education completely cuts them off from the vast opportunities of the modern, connected global world. They inherit their parents' massive debts, their deep superstitions, and their intense, desperate reliance on the brutal lottery of the illegal gold mines. Generations of brilliant minds and strong bodies are being fed directly into the dark, freezing tunnels, completely consumed by the massive mountain. La Rinconada does not just extract gold from the earth. It extracts the youth, the health, and the future from its most vulnerable residents. They are the true, tragic sacrifice demanded by Sleeping Beauty, paying the ultimate price for a desperate dream they never actually chose. while the people of La Rinconada battle daily against poverty and toxic pollution, an even larger, entirely unstoppable threat is looming directly above them. The massive Sleeping Beauty Glacier, the ancient frozen giant that has watched over the town for centuries, is rapidly and visibly melting away. Global climate change is drastically altering the high-altitude Andean environment, causing terrifying, highly destructive mudslides as the permafrost slowly thaws. The weather patterns are becoming increasingly chaotic and violent, delivering massive, unpredictable blizzards that completely bury the uninsulated tin shacks. As the glacier retreats, the vital source of summer meltwater that the lower valleys depend on is slowly disappearing, threatening a massive regional drought. For the miners, the melting ice makes the already unstable, illegally dug tunnels significantly more dangerous, drastically increasing the frequency of lethal cave-ins. The mountain is literally falling apart, completely destabilized by decades of unregulated dynamite blasting and the rapidly warming global atmosphere. The older residents watch the receding ice line with deep, unspoken dread, fully aware that the delicate environmental balance holding the town together is shattering. They are trapped between the incredibly toxic, poisoned earth below their feet and the rapidly collapsing, unstable frozen sky above their heads. The question is no longer if La Rinconada will eventually collapse, but rather which disaster will finally be the one to completely erase it. It is a profound, highly uncomfortable paradox that the very technology connecting the modern global world relies heavily on the brutal suffering occurring here. The tiny, highly conductive gold components hidden inside our modern laptops, electric vehicles, and smartphones must originate from somewhere. In many cases, they originate from the freezing, toxic, and completely unregulated tunnels of La Rinconada, extracted by men completely cut off from the digital age. The global demand for massive technological convenience actively and aggressively fuels the medieval horrific labor conditions taking place above the clouds. Major international corporations frequently claim absolute ignorance regarding the origins of their raw materials, hiding behind massive, complex supply chains. But the brutal reality is that every time a consumer upgrades to the newest technological device, they are unknowingly funding the terrifying Cacareo system. They are funding the massive mercury pollution, the complete ecological annihilation of the Andes, and the rapid theft of thousands of childhoods. The extreme isolation of La Rinconada allows the modern world to happily maintain its comfortable illusions, ignoring the massive human cost of globalization. We deeply value the pure, unblemished final product, but we aggressively refuse to look at the freezing, bloody mud it was dragged out of. The town is the dark, hidden engine room of modern civilization, a place where people suffer invisibly so the rest of the world can comfortably shine. If you stay in La Rinconada long enough, you eventually realize that the price of basic human survival here is completely and utterly devastating. The physical price is paid in deeply scarred lungs, destroyed nervous systems, severely overworked hearts, and rapidly aging, broken bodies. The emotional price is paid in extreme, isolating loneliness, forced separation from loved ones, and the massive, crushing weight of constant, daily trauma. The financial price is the terrifying reality of inescapable, predatory debt, turning free men into indentured servants locked inside a freezing prison. The environmental price is the complete, permanent destruction of an incredibly ancient, sacred mountain ecosystem that will never support life again. The moral price is a society forced to completely abandon basic human empathy, replacing community support with a brutal, lawless survival of the fittest. You must sacrifice your health, your morals, your sanity, and often your actual life, simply for the microscopic chance of holding a small yellow rock. It forces a person to ask the most terrifying, fundamental question: what is the actual, objective value of a human life? In La Rinconada, the brutal, unwritten answer is that a human life is completely worthless compared to the immense value of the gold. The mountain sets the absolute price, and the desperate people who arrive here have absolutely no choice but to pay it in full. For the vast majority of the 50,000 residents, leaving La Rinconada is no longer a matter of simply buying a bus ticket. They are completely, profoundly trapped by a complex web of extreme poverty, predatory financial debt, and severe physical illness. If a miner suffering from chronic mountain sickness attempts to descend to sea level too quickly, his thickened blood can cause a massive, fatal stroke. They cannot afford to leave. They are physically too sick to leave, and they are psychologically completely broken by the relentless failure of their dreams. The town slowly, methodically grinds away their initial hope, replacing it with a grim, deeply resigned acceptance of their freezing, toxic reality. They become completely institutionalized by the extreme chaos, terrifyingly convinced that they can no longer survive in the normal, regulated world below. Generations are born into this massive, icy trap, inheriting the massive debts and the deeply toxic environment without ever having made a choice. It is a terrifying, high-altitude purgatory, a place where people are not actually living, but simply waiting anxiously for the mountain to finally consume them. La Rinconada is incredibly easy to enter, but due to its brutal, predatory design, it is almost mathematically impossible to ever successfully leave. They are permanently anchored to the massive glacier, forgotten completely by the world below, frozen forever in a desperate, endless search for gold. When human beings are pushed to the absolute breaking point of physical and psychological survival, a profound, highly uncomfortable philosophical truth is revealed. Down at sea level, modern society is completely obsessed with minor inconveniences, artificial social status, and the relentless, exhausting pursuit of endless comfort. But standing at 16,000 feet, shivering in the toxic, freezing mud, you immediately realize how profoundly ridiculous those modern anxieties actually are. La Rinconada violently strips away every single illusion of civilized society, reducing human existence to its absolute, rawest, most fundamental core. It forces you to understand that survival is not a guaranteed human right. It is a brutal daily negotiation with an environment that actively wants you dead. It teaches you that true resilience is not about constantly succeeding. It is about finding absolute failure every single day and still choosing to wake up. You learn that the human spirit is terrifyingly elastic, capable of normalizing levels of trauma and suffering that would completely destroy a fragile mind. The extreme altitude forces a massive ego death, constantly reminding you of exactly how incredibly small and insignificant you are compared to the earth when you have absolutely nothing left. No money, no health, no warmth, and no oxygen. You finally discover exactly who you truly are in the dark. This extreme, brutal environment provides a massive, clarifying shock to the system, revealing the absolute true nature of human endurance. Looking at the absolute horror of La Rinconada, it is incredibly easy to simply judge the residents as desperate, greedy fools trapped in a nightmare. But we must look closer, because this freezing, toxic town is actually a massive, horrifying mirror reflecting the absolute worst aspects of our global society. It shows us exactly what happens when the relentless, desperate pursuit of extreme wealth is completely stripped of all moral and environmental regulations. It proves that capitalism, in its most primal, unregulated form, will happily destroy the environment and completely enslave human beings for microscopic profit. It is a terrifying warning about the massive, tragic human cost of extreme inequality, showing the horrific lengths people will go to escape crushing poverty. It exposes the deep hypocrisy of governments that happily ignore massive human rights abuses as long as the illegal wealth continues to quietly flow. It is a stark, visual reminder of the devastating impacts of global climate change on the most isolated, highly vulnerable populations on Earth. La Rinconada is not an isolated anomaly. It is the dark, inevitable consequence of a global system that heavily values shiny metals over human lives. We cannot simply look away in disgust, because the very gold that powers our modern, comfortable lives is heavily stained with their freezing, toxic blood. The town is desperately trying to teach us a lesson about human greed. But the world is aggressively, willfully refusing to listen. In a town entirely obsessed with tearing a precious metal from the frozen earth, the actual concept of wealth becomes deeply, tragically distorted. A man here might possess a bag full of pure gold nuggets, worth tens of thousands of dollars, yet he still lacks the ability to take a hot shower. He might be incredibly rich on paper, but he is still forced to breathe highly neurotoxic mercury vapor and sleep in an uninsulated, freezing tin box. You quickly realize that true, actual wealth is not the shiny yellow rock. True wealth is simply breathing clean air and drinking uncontaminated water. True luxury is the incredible privilege of sleeping peacefully through the night without waking up gasping frantically for a single breath of oxygen. Wealth is the ability to grow old gracefully rather than having your physical body completely broken and destroyed by the time you reach 40. It is the absolute luxury of knowing your children are safe, educated, and not forced to scavenge a toxic garbage dump to survive the winter. All the gold hidden inside. Sleeping Beauty cannot buy back a nervous system completely destroyed by heavy metals or lungs ruined by fine silica dust. The ultimate, devastating irony of La Rinconada is that the people completely sacrifice their true, irreplaceable wealth just to hold a shiny, useless rock. They traded the absolute paradise of health and safety for a freezing, toxic hellscape, completely blinded by the powerful, ancient illusion of gold. Despite its absolute horrors, La Rinconada stands as an incredible, terrifying monument to the sheer, unstoppable force of human willpower. It proves that human beings are capable of surviving and adapting to environments that defy all known biological, logical, and architectural rules. There is a dark, gritty, and undeniable majesty to the absolute stubbornness required to simply wake up every single day in this frozen wasteland. It is a massive, sprawling testament to the lengths we will go to support our families, to escape poverty, and to violently chase an impossible dream. Amidst the extreme violence and the toxic pollution, there are still incredible, quiet moments of profound human solidarity and deep mutual sacrifice. You will find mothers giving up everything to protect their children, and desperate men sharing their last drop of clean water in the dark. It is a place where the absolute worst aspects of human greed collide directly with the most beautiful, resilient aspects of the human spirit. La Rinconada will likely eventually collapse, slowly erased by the melting glacier, the toxic pollution, or the sheer, crushing impossibility of its own existence. But until that day comes, It will remain the last, most extreme outpost of the modern gold rush, a freezing city clinging desperately to the sky. It is a loud, chaotic, and desperately tragic challenge to the universe, proving that humanity absolutely refuses to be defeated by the Earth. As we finally prepare to leave the highest, most toxic city on Earth, the thin, freezing air feels incredibly heavy with profound, unanswered questions. La Rinconada is not a place you can simply visit and easily forget. It violently infects your mind, permanently altering how you view the modern world. It makes you deeply uncomfortable with your own massive privilege, forcing you to question the invisible human suffering hiding behind your everyday conveniences. It shatters the comforting illusion that extreme, medieval labor conditions are simply a dark relic of the distant, historical past. It demands that we finally look directly at the people completely abandoned by modern globalization, refusing to let them simply disappear into the ice. It is a horrifying warning about exactly what humanity is capable of when we heavily prioritize profit over basic empathy and environmental survival. But simultaneously, it is a testament to the fact that even in the deepest, most toxic darkness, the human desire for a better life remains completely indestructible. They are trapped, they are poisoned, and they are completely forgotten. But they absolutely refuse to quietly lay down in the snow and die. The town will continue to aggressively tear the mountain apart, completely driven by an ancient, tragic hope that simply cannot be extinguished. It is the ultimate paradox of human nature, creating a literal, freezing hell on Earth simply because we desperately want to reach heaven. The brutal Andean sun rapidly dips below the jagged peaks, instantly plunging the massive, chaotic slum into deep, terrifying sub-zero darkness. The freezing wind howls aggressively through the narrow, garbage-filled alleyways, carrying the invisible, highly neurotoxic mercury vapor over the sleeping tin shacks. A single, exhausted miner, completely covered in toxic gray dust, slowly drags his broken body up the steep, icy hill towards his uninsulated home. He stops for a moment, turning his incredibly tired, bloodshot eyes back toward the massive, dark entrance of the illegal, unmapped mine tunnel. He lets out a long, foggy breath into the freezing air, heavily pushes open a rusty tin door, and completely disappears back into the toxic dark.